Now, going into that debut album, what kind of conversations did you and the guys have as far as the concepts and ideas behind the songs?
I mean and this is, I mean, we mentioned the demo. I can't even believe I forgot it. The initial song that we released, the only song we released from that project, ultimately before we were released from the label, was Southern Comfort. That was on the demo too, but in a different form, right? So because we were already leaning in the whole Southern thing, and even before we solidified the name, it was it naturally lent itself to where we made a lot of references to that, in the album. And then I think, if I remember correctly, because this is a while, man, so it's like, I think one side is it's something down something, and the other side is up north or something like that. And then the album itself is called Lost in Brooklyn. So it was the whole play on the challenge of, I could say, being from the South, but particularly for Jeremy and I being in the North. Like, Mayor already had family here. He grew up in New York, so it was like he had experiences. So the whole Lost in Brooklyn thing, we would always make references to our experiences of being from the South, like a newcomer to the city, right? And then what it felt like from that perspective, and then the perspective of looking back toward the South. And so, like, Lost in Brooklyn, that's a very true thing, because in getting to know New York, we were lost in Brooklyn. A couple times I remember driving down Flatbush, and, like, now you realize how Flatbush cuts over from the Bell Parkway down to downtown Brooklyn. It's super easy, but when you don't know it, initially you're getting lost, and this whole thing. So we use our experiences, really, but we definitely constantly played on the South and the North, and the juxtaposition between the two, and the challenges, the victories, all the different things. So
Now, when Southern Comfort dropped as a single, what do you remember most about the feedback and reception from the peers and the fans?
yeah, I think it was interesting, because when song came out, I remember doing the video. First of all, like, that was a great experience, like doing the actual music video. It was a director from the West Coast. He It was the director who did the Far Side video. So the famous one when hanging upside down. Sorry, that I can't remember the brother's name. And I remember we obviously were up north, right? And where are we going to go? So we end up going to Van Cortlandt Park or something in the Bronx, because they had, like, fields, so to play on of that. So I think, like, because we did a video and that whole process, and then the release, and then when it came out, the South was still had buzz and stuff. So it was well received. But that was in the time where you had, like, Snoop and all these different things. So while that was still there, that's when the gangster rap stuff, and that turn was being made away from, what was considered a softer side of the South, like the music, right? Music was definitely going in a harder direction, you know and not to say it didn't exist even before we started. Obviously, that harder music did. We weren't trying to do that, but the attention that was getting a lot of people, the fans were drawn to the Snoops, and the different things like that. So, but we fit more within the native tongue camps, and and that doesn't mean that it's soft. It's just not, gunplay stuff, or a lot of misogyny, stuff like that. But it was well received. Obviously, not to the point where the label's like, oh man, you're selling these major records. We have to, keep you on. But for what it was, we would, do some shows, and it was good. It was a great experience.
Right. Now, you'd mentioned earlier the all-star cast of producers for this project. Talk a little bit about the beat selection process.
Okay. Well, at the label, because Stretch and eventually Reef Tulo became the A&R there. So through their relationships, the Beat Nuts were buzzing, with the work that they were doing. So they connected us with them. And I'll speak about the Beat Nuts, T Ray, and a little bit of, like, Stretch working with him. So the Beat Nuts is interesting, because the Beat Nuts, the group at the time, was actually four members: Les, Juju, Vic, and it's the guy that raps, man. I'm sorry, because I only really dealt with the producers.
Right.
So it was like, but the other brother that
Alterique.
rap, yeah. So the other brother that rapped, right? He wasn't necessarily. I never knew that he was a producer. We didn't deal with him that way. So we only dealt with the the producer side. So we would go to Vic's house, and see, from me, as that's what inspired me, because I did most of the production for the album, and I was in stretching them were encouraging me, hey man, you need to pursue this producer thing, MC wise. Like they feel, okay, you're good. I think they felt Soda Pop was better than me. At the time you don't want to hear that, but it's like that's fine. I'm like, okay, well, all right, the producing, Reef would always talking about, man, you need to make the snares harder. Like, and he's calling his head, I had like Dixie cup snares, and he be hitting the, like soft, like, with soft snares and stuff. But then like working with Juju and Vic, going to the house, less a little bit, but it mainly was Juju and Vic that I went to the houses and just learning from them, and because they were on the rise themselves, they had the hot hand at the time. And then T Ray, um, he had a hot hand too. They're like not gonna be able to do it,
Mm.
Double X Posse and some different things. He was the artifacts came later. They got signed later and he did a lot of that stuff. But sitting with him, going to his house, just being with him and going through, he was showing me how he would chop stuff and go through his record collection and stuff like that. So working with them, obviously it's not like they were far in their career, but they definitely were professional producers, right? So was learning like what they were learning on the fly. And then Stretch, he was at A&R, but Stretch DJ producing and stuff, had large record collection, so was learning a lot of techniques, just the people around. And then I was starting to interact with other just local New York guys that we were meeting through them, who weren't signed necessarily where we were, but it was just, it was definitely, I was encouraged to produce. So you remember early on I said about Richmond, someone saw the value in me producing. I didn't necessarily see it that way. I was just doing it as a function to rap, right? And then years later, someone else. So then, okay, I produced. We got songs on the demo. We got signed, and then another group of people from a professional context, right? Say, hey, there's something in your production here. You need to pursue it. So having that dual um, validation, in 2 points in time, really just put me at least on the path to just put in the work. Don't take it for granted. Because oftentimes, in life, like we all have things we appreciate and we have things we take for granted, you know.
Right.
And a lot of times we don't observe the value. That's the thing with I'm learning even with parenting. Kids don't see the value. Like part of a major job as a parent is to I see something there. Not necessarily for but like start to craft set the environment to see if it will flourish, Because a fish, if you put it on the ground, it is not gonna flourish. But a fish needs water. You put it in the water, you just set that environment for it, and fish will just naturally, you know, mature, and succeed. So
Right. What do you remember most about those studio sessions creating that album?
um how much money was spent on the food budget. And I remember, man, it was like, and the reason why I said this is because to the point where, and we were such we, maybe when you look back, I mean, fortunately, we didn't have to pay all that back. Like the record label system, the way it works is they counteract stuff that succeeds against stuff that's a write off, right? So we never were on the hook for this, but I remember, man, that we were in sessions and we were genuinely nice guys, but when you have to continue in the image, right? The nice guy image, not just you're nice, but then also the image. I remember it was one session working with the Beatnuts, and man, they brought every guy from their neighborhood, bro. It was like, yeah, man, go ahead, turkey burgers, and I just said because that's more of a funny moment of like just the reality of like you're in the studio and you just have this budget on tap, which is you're still responsible for in some form or fashion, right? But from a musical side, I remember sitting with Rich July. He was the engineer for the album, and while everybody, there we hanging out and stuff, but I found myself sitting at the board. He was the one that when I would sit at the board and he was teaching me like the SSL console, and we do the mutes and the automation and stuff. And I just, to the point now where like that's continued on with me, my love for like audio and mixing and all of this stuff like that. um that was the thing I think I got that I didn't expect to get. I just came, hey, I'm a rapper in the group and I'm a producer in the group, but the thing I got from the sessions that I wasn't expecting, but that has lasted just as long as any of the other stuff, is the love for actual audio and sound sculpting through EQs and things of that nature.
Right. Now, when that album finally dropped, what do you remember most about the magazine reviews and what the consumers were saying?
I think that, I mean, it was good reviews. We didn't really get any, I don't remember any like really harsh reviews. But like I said, the environment that it came out in, it was just, it didn't get the major attention. And plus the label, that's when what's the art? Yeah, the artifacts were coming out around the same time too. Group from Tame One and Elder Sensei. So they, even within the context we were in, they had the hot hand, right? Like they felt like, oh yeah, you guys did a good album. It took us a long time to do the album because just beat selection and some sample clearances didn't go, and different things like that. Just finding out inspiration, and but then the artifacts came, and so it's not even just outside of your context that you're competing within the context, of like the label or whatever, and what you're really competing with is attention, of the executives, and because it's natural, it's a business, and at being a business, they're gonna like which one looks like it's gonna do the most, right? And so
Right.
we go put the money behind it. Because if you remember, like even let's say Craig Mack, when he came out Flavor Year, that was just on a tape. That was kind of a throw. That wasn't like necessarily designed to like, hey man, this is go, and it just took off. So when it's starting to take, you have to run with it as a business. But I would say that yeah, it was received. We definitely got some love for it, but it was good, but it wasn't like great reception.
Right. Were you guys able to tour off that project?
Spot date shows and stuff like that. No real touring, because right after it came out, um that you had like turnover at the label. We had some disagreements on, kind of like the focus that was, because it's just natural. Like a staff that's with you, they're there every day. You go there to the label, you show up, dapping them up, you all this stuff like that, and then the attrition at record labels is pretty high, right? So you have this churn, and soon as you have, all it takes is a couple of key people to move out and go on to other opportunities, and they come in and they're not hot on you. Like, I wouldn't have signed them, or they're cool, but it becomes just the I'm gonna do my job kind of work instead of the excitement, and that's the thing that happens a lot of times where the attrition, before you could be right at the end of your project. I've even seen it happen to friends recently, sign and about to release a project, and a whole staff gets wiped, you know, or the label gets absorbed, into a larger major, a major label, and it happens, right?
Right.
So it's not just with the consumers on the outside, who just buy the records or stream or do whatever. It's, do the people internally, are they rocking with you? Are they hungry to keep? Because when you look back, and I realize this now doing like the raucous stuff, I realized that more, I probably got the seed from Big Beat, that experience with the attrition there, but the raucous, because it was such the independent nature of it, it was just really there from the grassroots of it, as far as in with most and stuff like that. Um, the value of the record labels, and I think a lot of artists, we don't give credit to like how hard these people worked to get us to the point where we have some type of reputation with the name. We definitely did not get there without their help. You know, people who going to work but staying up and just excited to get this to the, this 1,000 DJs on a list or whatever. Like it just, and we tend to forget it because somehow we think that our talent got the talent is only a small portion of what it is to really get an artist exposed.
Right. Now, did you guys have a follow up in the works, or did everything start to crumble immediately after the debut album?
Yeah, it was starting to crumble. We didn't even get. We had the first single, Southern Comfort. That's all we ended up doing. The video, and I don't remember the timeline we were dropped, but it was with from the release of Southern Comfort, release of the album within a year, you know. And like I said, just because I remember there was a new label head. I think while we were doing it, Craig, kudos to him, bro. He's like still the CEO, which is amazing, right? But while we were there, Craig himself went to Atlantic. So then there was a new head of Big Beat, so the lady, not sure of her name, but think about that. Like Craig was down to, hey man, hey guys, I like what you're doing, and then the head of the label moves on, and then you bring in another head who's making the decisions for that label, not much less the radio guy or the marketing guy. Then it's like, mm, you know, and so it would just and sales weren't naturally, jumping. So, hey, it's a business, man.